So today we're going to be taking a look at a scenario where Russia and China go to war. Now in my last video I asked you guys to leave some non-empire video suggestions in the comments, and I got a lot of them. I looked through them and I saw a lot of Russia versus China, so we're going to be doing that today. Now I'm kind of surprised I haven't done this video already, since they are, the second and third strongest country in the world. They also have a lot of allies around them, so it would be interesting to see like who picks whose side and how this would exactly play out. If you guys want to support the channel and help it grow, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and share the video. And without further ado, let's just go ahead and get into the video. Now, I'm not exactly sure how this war would start, but we're going to assume that China is the aggressor here. And that is simply just because Russia is mainly, geographically, it's focused over here, whereas China is more focused over here. It's a lot more easier to move troops up than it is to move troops over here. So with that in mind, like I said, we have China declaring war on Russia. Now, I'm not sure how this war would start. I'm not sure why it would start, and it would be a very, very interesting war. Let's just start the war. So at first, we have Chinese troops pushing across and taking over southern Russia. Now, I know this area is pretty heavily defended, but we are talking about the entire Chinese army here versus just the Russian defensive forces, so they easily push through this area. Now, when it comes to picking sides here, this would be a very interesting war. It would be weird. And that is mainly because Russia and China share a lot of allies, and they also kind of don't have a lot of allies. They have economical allies and a lot of them, but military wise, maybe they wouldn't be getting that much help. But of course, right away, we would have Russia's biggest ally, Belarus, join the war. Anyway, continuing on over here near Manchuria, we have Chinese troops crossing the border once again. And this time, their goal is to push up and create a spearhead that would cut off these Russian forces from the rest of Russia. Now, at this point in the war, we would probably see some form of Chinese troops crossing the border over here, but I don't really think that that would be smart, because you probably want to hold a defensive over here until you can invade all of this area. And this is the smallest gap over here, so holding this position would be the smartest thing to do. So for now, we have China just focusing over here on this front. So now it's time for China to get some allies. China does have allies. They're not, the strongest countries, but a pretty strong one is North Korea. Now, North Korea can just throw troops at Russia, no problem. Other than that, I don't know how they would fare up against them. And honestly, I'm not even too sure if North Korea would join this war, simply because they rely on both China and Russia. Mostly China, but also Russia. So yeah, Russia does have a few more allies in which will be joining this war. But for now, let's just go ahead and play this area out. Back over to the spearhead, we have China completing it, and the main Chinese force continuing to push north. Eventually, China manages to capture all of the area, and with that, they make a landing on Sakhalin and easily take over the island. So with this, we would have a pretty interesting reaction from the rest of the world. First of all, modern day, you have one of two sides. You have the Western side, the United States and Europe, or you have the non-Western side, Russia and China. And unfortunately for the world, there is really not that many neutral countries left. There are countries like India who hold relations with both sides. India, there's also like Turkey, relations with both sides. Egypt, I can go on. But for the most part, the world is pretty divided when it comes to East and West. But now we have an interesting scenario where it's not West versus East, it's East versus East. Now the problem with that is, like I said, it's either East or West, which means the people that are on the eastern side have to go even further and then choose one of two new sides. So you can see it's a very hard situation for the Eastern allies. Anyway, on the subject of allies, we have another country joining this war. They were kind of forced to join, but we're going to ignore that. We have Mongolia joining the war. Mongolia is more of a Russian ally than it is a Chinese ally. In fact, Mongolia and China really don't like each other that much. So Russian troops moving into Mongolia in order to gain an offensive against China is pretty likely. Now with this, we have another turn of events, which is Kyrgyzstan joining the war on the side of China. Now I'm pretty sure Kyrgyzstan and China hold relations that are better than Kyrgyzstan and Russia. That's what I've heard, that's what I've researched, that's what I think I know that is right. I also know that Tajikistan is in a conflict with Kyrgyzstan, and this whole Central Asia area is just a complete mess, but I think this would be pretty likely. If you know more about these areas, or if you're from there, correct me in the comments. I'm open for corrections, but this is what I'm going to be doing for now. So now we have a new front opening in the war, and let's just say that front does not last very long. Chinese forces in Kyrgyzstan managed to push across the border and start to capture areas of Tajikistan. Meanwhile, up north, we have Russian troops that are already pushing in Mongolia, starting to push down towards Beijing. Now Russia has one very big, well actually not even one, they have two very big advantages in this war. The first advantage being that their capital is way over here, while China's capital lays right here. The second advantage being that this is like a wasteland. There is nothing here. There is no reason to invade it. So China would just be wasting resources invading these areas until they get to like past the Ural Mountains into the eastern part of Russia. that's when they would start taking cities and getting advantages. But for now, they're just kind of stuck over here. So this war would definitely not be in favor of China at all. You know, Russia's already stronger. Manpower wise, I think China has the advantage. And then, you know, just overall military, Russia has the advantage. Anyway, back over in Tajikistan, we have Kyrgyzstan and China capitulating the country. Now, I do apologize for this. I'm not sure about the relations with Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan when it comes to Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. I don't know if they would get involved. The same goes with Kazakhstan. But I'm going to be leaving these countries out of the war for now, just because I don't think it's in their interest of joining. So earlier, I was talking about Western and Eastern relations, and I mentioned India. Now, India is one of those countries that shares relations with both the West and the East. If India was given the choice between the United States and Russia, I do think they would choose Russia over the USA. But that is, you know, it's I wouldn't say very close, but it's close enough to where it's neutral. See, India's smart. They play both sides and they always come out on top. Speaking of coming out on top, we have India joining this war on the side of Russia, one of their greatest allies. So now Pakistan has been put in an interesting scenario. You know, Russia, which they're not the best of allies with, I wouldn't say that they're enemies. I said that about Greece and Serbia in the last video, so I'm not going to say anything about Russian and Pakistani relations, but they are really good allies with China, and that is why I'm going to be putting them on the side of China. Not only are they good allies with China, but they also hate India, so this just makes sense. But yeah, zooming back out, now we have 2, 3, 4, and 9 all at war with each other, and the world is just kind of, you know, watching as this all plays out. On the topic of allies, once more, we have Iran. I don't know what they would do. Probably nothing. So for now, this is what the war is going to look like. There's going to be no more additions to any side, and we're just going to be focusing on pure conflict. So let's go ahead and jump right into that. Over near Siberia, we have Chinese troops continuing their push up north, while they also make a campaign towards Lake Baikal. Now, China's offensive is mainly focused over here in Manchuria. They did anticipate Mongolia joining the war, but they didn't prepare. You know, it's important to anticipate and prepare. China only did one of those. So we have Russian troops starting their push in from Mongolia into Inner Mongolia. At the same time in the south, we have Indian troops pushing over into southern China, while on the border, India and Pakistan make a campaign into Kashmir. China's campaigns towards this lake continues. Meanwhile, Russian troops down south start to push towards Beijing, and Indian troops over here in southern China start to push out. We also have India pushing back Pakistan in the south, as well as starting to push back in the Kashmir region. Eventually, Indian troops cross over into southern Pakistan, while Pakistani troops cross over from Islamabad. Up north, we have Chinese troops getting pushed back by Russian troops, and eventually they are sort of encircled. This leads to Russia taking them all out and gaining the ground when it comes to taking back southern Russia. They also managed to halt the spearhead that was going towards Lake Baikal. Now, as we know, Russia may not be the strongest it seems to be, and that's okay, because, you know, if number 2 isn't that good, then there's no way number 3 is that good. Now, modernly, we haven't seen the Chinese army really invade anywhere, so I don't really know what China would do in a war or what that would even look like. So it's hard to kind of predict and see how this would go. You know, we know what the Russian military looks like, we know what the US military looks like, but we really don't know what the Chinese military looks like in action. I can only assume that it's good, but we can't put that theory to test, so we're gonna have to rely on this for now. Back down south, we see another spearhead emerge from Russia with the goal of meeting up with India, who's also forming their own spearhead. Back over in Pakistan, we have Indian troops pushing back up north into Kashmir and securing the region. Eventually, they push out into their claimed areas. Eventually, India makes plans to cut off Pakistan and China, which they do so successfully, and by doing so, they cut off supply, which lets India push Pakistan out of India. Back over near Mongolia, we have another Chinese offensive, which is sneaking up behind the Russian army. This leads them to evacuate from this area of Mongolia, letting it fall into Chinese hands. Luckily for Russia though, they make a naval landing over here in Sakhalin, which leads to the liberation of the entire island, and another landing being made in eastern Russia. So now we see these two Russian armies start to push toward each other. They link up. With this, Russia gains ground against China over here in the east. Over near Kazakhstan, we see Russian troops push down into this area of China, and eventually Russian and Mongolian troops push across on all fronts. We see the two spearheads making a lot of progress and almost meeting up in central China. Over in Pakistan, Indian troops managed to capture Islamabad. With that, we have the capitulation of Pakistan, but a lot of guerrilla warfare, and I mean a lot, like not like Vietnam levels. I'm like 10 times worse than Vietnam levels over here in Pakistan. These two really hate each other, like a lot. So while India struggles to suppress all Pakistani rebellions, they also do manage to push over and connect with Russia. Now this is a pretty big step in the war, seeing as these two now can share supplies, intel, and troops, and it really isn't good for China as Russia nears Beijing. In an effort to save their country, they withdraw all troops from Russia and hold a defensive in Manchuria, while also putting a lot of troops in their capital. Over near Stanland, we have Indian troops pushing up in order to liberate Tajikistan. They managed to do so successfully as Kyrgyzstan has sent a lot of troops over to the front line of China, and in turn that leads to the collapse of the country. So now China is facing invasion on pretty much every side except further southeast. Up north, Russian troops managed to push into northern Manchuria and down into North Korea. So at this point, it looks like China may not last that much longer. I mean, they did get themselves in a war with number 2 and number 4, so it makes sense. That being said, though, they are the 3rd strongest country in the world, so they might be able to hold out, but honestly, I think it would be too much on too many different fronts, and definitely too many personnel for them to handle. So eventually, China starts to fall back and their forces start to collapse. We see the capitulation of North Korea and Russian troops flooding into Manchuria. Eventually, we have the capturing of Beijing, which allows for a large encirclement of many Chinese forces up north. These forces are eventually wiped out, and with this, Russia and India can continue their push down south. Now, just because China lost their capital doesn't mean that they can capitulate right away. China is an economically stable country, and I'm sure losing their capital wouldn't mean the surrender of the entire country. There are a lot of industrial and economical cities on the coast of China, so they would most likely be able to hold out. But speaking of holding out, we do have this area in China over here, which is full of pretty much nobody. And seeing as it's full of nobody, we could probably assume that Russian and Indian forces would be able to get it under their control, other than like maybe the Himalayas. But just for simplicity's sake, let's just do that. So now we have China being stuck over here, and they are done taking the beating. They put all of their troops into mobilization and put them on the front against Russia and India. With this front line being set up, we have no movement on either side and a big stalemate being formed. And it's going to stay like this for many weeks. Now, Russia and India are not dumb countries. Well, I don't know about Russia, but I know India's not stupid. And, you know, this war, it's pretty much won by them. They managed to take out 3 countries and half of China, so what's the point of fighting anymore? Why not just offer peace? And offering peace is exactly what they do. So yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at a peace treaty between these countries. Alright, so taking a look at this peace treaty here, we have a pretty interesting one, and not necessarily a pretty one, but it makes a lot of sense if you think about it. So first, starting off, obviously Russia annexes land from China, and said land is just Manchuria. We have North Korea getting off the hook, but we do have a regime change which is more pro-Russian. Mongolia gets all of Inner Mongolia. Now I tried my best to draw this out as, you know, as accurate as I could. I had a reference. I'm not sure if it's perfect. I think it actually needs to be a little in more, but that's fine. Mongolia gets a lot of land out of this. India gets all of their Kashmir claims, and they also get some land off of Pakistan over here in eastern Pakistan. Tibet is released, as well as Xinjiang, and China remains communist. Now, Russia didn't put a regime change in China because they are the ones that offered peace to China, so they don't really have a right to change anything. So with this, we have the end of the Russia-Chinese war, and yeah, so Asia has changed a lot. Obviously, China has lost a lot of power and influence. And economically, they're probably fine because they didn't lose too much valuable land other than like maybe Manchuria, but they still have a lot of their coast, so they're good. The only problem they have now is that they are completely surrounded by enemies. Oh, and also Kyrgyzstan got annexed by this new province, so they're a part of them now. Hopefully that'll resolve the issue with Tajikistan. I'm not really sure how that would be solved, but now they're just chilling. But yeah, China is now surrounded by enemies. And, well, to be even more clear, they are completely surrounded by enemies. So the existence of the Chinese state may be in question for the future. Like, they are really, like, if you zoom out, the more you zoom out, the worse it gets. Alright, anyway, I'm going to end the video here. So if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe and share. That really helps me out. It helps grow the channel. If you guys have any more suggestions, like I said in the last video, non-Empire videos preferably, because I want to, you know, do things that aren't Empire videos. I usually like to do Empire videos when I'm running low on ideas, and this was a good idea, so I did this instead. So, more ideas that aren't Empire videos. You guys have some pretty good ones in the last video, and you can repost them here, preferably make new ones. I'll go back and reread through the old video, but still, suggestions are important. Once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.